Well, Happy New Year, and I hope that this video is continue to find you well and staying safe. We are up in my attic, my very messy, disorganized attic today. And the reason being is that we just this past weekend, we managed to pack up all of our Christmas stuff and get it back up here into the attic where it belongs. Got it out of the house. And it's always a good feeling because it means, for me, it means I'm almost finished for the year with having to come up into this attic and grab boxes of things and take them down and then bring the empty boxes back up and then have all this decoration around my house. And so usually what happens, and well, it always happens, in October we begin with Halloween, and I think there's like 10 boxes of Halloween stuff, or 6 boxes of Halloween stuff. And then we move on to the next month, which is November, which is Thanksgiving. We only have like 6 or 7 of those boxes. And then we've got Christmas boxes that go all the way around here and here, and they stop about right here. You can't see them right here. And there are about 32 of those boxes, 32, 42, I don't know, I stopped counting. And bringing all those boxes down, it's a feat. The entire family is involved and getting them all out, and then packing them all up after Christmas is done. And it took us 2 days to pack everything up and get it back up here. And I think we have finally gotten the last vestiges of Christmas decorations up here. We always find a few after we think we've gotten them all. And that means that the last boxes that will have to come down are these 6 or 7 boxes here marked Easter. And those will come down, and we'll put out the Easter decorations. And then after Easter, I'm finished. I don't have to come back up here if I don't want to, which is good because it'll be hot up here in that springtime and summertime. So I do not want to come back up here. And generally speaking, each of these boxes, each of these groups spend about a month. So from October until, well, it depends on when Easter is, until March or April, I'm coming up here and just recycling and cycling these boxes in and out of this attic space. And as I've gotten older, it's gotten a little bit more challenging, and I have come to appreciate most certainly when I do not have to come up here and I do not have to carry these boxes and we do not have to decorate. I'm not trying to be a bah humbug. I love the decorations. They bring a lot of good memories, but oh man, I do appreciate those times when we're not in holiday mode. And we have the same thing going on in the church, really. If you think about it, we have our liturgical year. It begins with Advent, goes into Christmas time. We've had Epiphany, and then we've had we've had Epiphany, and then we will come and have this little break. We're in this little break time where we've had Advent, we've had Christmas, we've had Epiphany, I've had the baptism of Jesus. And now there's sort of this ordinary time, this time of waiting, which will then, and it's short, it's only about a month or two, and that will bring us into Lent. I think Lent starts at the end of February this year. And then we have Lent, and we build up to Easter, and then Pentecost. And so after Pentecost, there's really nothing. It's sort of like after Easter for me. We don't have to go back in the attic, in the liturgical calendar. It's what's called the ordinary time. And so if you want to think about it as mountaintops and valleys, the mountaintop times are those Advent and Christmas and Epiphany and Easter and Lent and Pentecost. Those are times where there's a great deal of activity within the church. There's a great deal of folks gathering and tradition and we're doing things liturgically wise. After that is what's called the ordinary time, the green time. It's when the green vestments come out, and we spend actually the majority of our time during the ordinary time, when there's not a whole lot of celebration, when there's not all this activity around a certain holiday or celebration, recognition. That is until we get to All Saints Sunday, and it all starts like over again. And so we spend the majority of our time in the valley, so to speak. If these celebrations are the mountaintop, we spend the majority of the time in our valley and in the ordinary time. And that is actually where we need to learn to live as Christians in the ordinary time. And need to learn to enjoy, just as I enjoy not having to come up in this attic and deal with holiday decorations. Christian life, you see, is lived in the ordinary time. It is the main part of our existence in the ordinary time. On Sunday, we can come and we can celebrate the Lord for an hour, maybe two. What we do between those 2 hours on Sunday and the next Sunday, that's important. What we do between the celebrations of Christmas and Easter and Lent and All Saints Sunday, what we do between those, that's important. How we live our life is important as Christians, because we live most of our lives during the ordinary time, during the time when there's not a great deal of celebration hoopla. Now, for many years, churches thought that the best time to bring people to the church was during those times of Christmas and Easter. And, you had your Creasters, your people who came only on Christmas and Easter. And that's the time where you focused most of your attention into building your church. And what we have found is that is not actually where you build your church. Yes, you do get a lot of people, you get an influx of money coming in, of donations and things of that nature, and there's a lot of activity, but your church is actually built during the ordinary times. During the times when there is not a huge hoopla, during the times when people are really living their life. During the times when you don't have to come up into the attic and get decorations and bring them down. And my friends, I'm afraid we as a church, we as a people, we as children of God have done not that great of a job of living our lives in the ordinary time. Because it doesn't take you long if you go and do an internet search to find all these lists of why people do not want to be around Christians. Oftentimes we're considered judgmental. People look at us and look at how we behave and they judge us as judgmental. Whether that's fair or not, we don't need to debate that right now, but we are perceived as judgmental. We are perceived as hypocritical. We say one thing, but we do another thing. These are all things that we do in the ordinary time that are turning people off from our faith, from being a part of our communities. And I saw this one, and this really struck me, is we stink at being friends. We stink at friendship. And the truth is that likes like. We like to hang around people that are like us, right? And we like to gather those people around us. And we have been doing that in the church for a very long time. And don't believe me? Take a look around in the pews. And when we can go back to church, right? Look around and how many people look just like you. We're not very good at bringing in different segments of the population and embracing those segments. And really, this is just a continuation of what is happening in our country and what sort of came to a culmination in the Capitol this past week, 2 weeks ago. This polarization of our society. I'm in this camp, you're in that camp, and we cannot be communicating together. We are at odds with us and them. This polarization has not only taken over our society, it's encamped in our churches. Us and them. How many times have you gone into a church meeting and gone, well, what can we do to get those people into our church? Well, those people aren't necessarily that different than you. Those people, the only difference between them and you is you're sitting in a church meeting and they're not. And so we have this polarization going on, and honestly, it is tearing our country apart, and it is tearing our churches apart, because we cannot sit down with people, we cannot reach across the aisle, we cannot even fathom being in the same room as somebody who thinks differently than us. And it's time as a church, as Christians, that we become honest with one another. We realize that we're not the solution, we're the problem. If we're not the problem, we've been silent for too long, and we need to speak up, and we need to say, hey, that's not right. What happened at the Capitol this past week was not right. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. I don't care who you supported for the president. That was not right for that to happen. It cut me to the quick to see our Capitol being overrun by people who wanted to force their agenda in a situation. That was not right. And that was the culmination of many years of polarization that's been happening in America and in our churches. And it is time that we stop as a church, as a Christian brotherhood, our silence. We need to speak into that. We need to start living authentic Christian lives during the ordinary times. We're pretty good at celebrating those special holidays on our liturgical calendar of embracing Christmas and peace on earth and goodwill towards men and Easter and shouting from the rooftops, Christ has risen. But what do we do when we exit the doors of our churches? What do we do when we're out in the shopping centers and in the grocery stores and in the checkout lines? How do we behave on the roads towards one another? How do we speak to one another? And that all starts with us learning to live authentic Christian lives during the ordinary times. Living our lives in the valley and not just living our life for the mountaintop. Because we're going to spend the most of our time in the valley. And here's what I have learned, and I will admit, honestly and without hypocrisy, I learned these in the rooms of recovery, of Celebrate Recovery and Alcoholics Anonymous. No, I'm not an addict, but I have learned from these people how to be a true and authentic Christian. They have taught me more than anybody I have sat next to in the pew, or any pastor I have listened to from the pulpit, or any book study I have gone to. How to be an authentic Christian. Well, the first step is to seek connection outside of your social circle. Alcoholism knows no boundaries when it comes to race, creed, or nationality. And so if you go to an AA meeting, there's not a lot of people that look alike. They are from all different walks of life. You have mothers of young children, to old folks who are in retirement, to executives in three-piece suits. Seek those connections and find those connections outside your social circle. Find the similarities that you have with one another instead of concentrating on the differences. Serve others. The last step of the AA, of the 12 steps, is to be in service to your community of fellow alcoholics and beyond. And it is in that service that you can continue your sobriety. Learn to be in service to one another, despite whether or not you agree with them or not. Serve them without trying to change their mind, without trying to make a point. Just serve and love one another. Have uncomfortable conversations. At the end of the day, the effects and the effects that we have on people are basically the conversations that we have with folks and the conversations that we avoid having with folks and those conversations that we didn't want to have. And sometimes they're comfortable and sometimes they're uncomfortable. And we need to stop avoiding uncomfortable conversations. We need to stop letting people just say something and going, oh, well, they didn't really mean it. We need to confront them and say, you know what, that hurt my feelings. I don't think that is right. And I would like for you to stop making that sexist joke. I would like for you to stop talking about people in that certain way. We need to have these uncomfortable conversations. We need to confront those things that we know in our hearts are not right. And we need to be willing to talk with one another. You'll notice I didn't say yell at each other. I said talk to one another, express our feelings, use our I statements. How is this making you feel? Not how that should make them feel. Because the truth is the only behavior that you can affect, and I learned this in the rooms of AA too, is your own. You can't affect others' behavior. You can only control your own behavior. Look for similarities instead of differences. Look for those similarities. You know how many times I would sit in the rooms of AA and somebody would go, you know what, you and I are just alike. You and I have the same issues. And I would go the same, you know what, I struggle with that too. We all struggle with very similar things, and we need to recognize the fact that we are in this life together. We are in this mess of life together, and that there are a great deal more similarities than there are differences among us. Give yourself and others permission to disagree. Give yourself and others permission to disagree. It is not necessary to always be right. You do not always have to prove a point. You do not have to always be the one in the know. You do not have to always be the one who gets their way. That's a toughie for us in the Christian faith, because we want people to know about the love of Jesus Christ and the gospel, and we think we know how to do that the best way, and we want more and more people to hear about it because we're excited, and we can turn people off in that excitement and in that desire for them to know the right way to God. We need to learn to trust in the Holy Spirit, trust in those authentic, honest conversations, trust in those connections outside of our social circle, and trust that the Holy Spirit will work in those, and we will all come one day to the gates of heaven. And they will go, and God will go, come forward, good and faithful servant. Come and be in here in eternity with me. The most important thing that I have learned in the rooms of AA about how to combat polarization, how to be in existence with others who might not necessarily agree with, is talk less, listen more. It's that simple. Close your mouth and just listen. Because it is when we listen, we can hear hurt. It is when we listen, we can hear pain. It is when we listen, we can begin to understand where somebody else is coming from. And all of these things, all of these practices that I learned in the rooms of AA, I have come to realize combat polarization, combat this us and them. Allow us to live authentic, true Christian lives in the valley, in the ordinary times, in those times where we're going to make the most effective change for this world and for the kingdom that is to come. My friends, I am praying for you. I love each and every one of you. And I hope and I pray that our country can begin the healing it so desperately needs. Amen.